Cold, wealthy CEO, arranged marriage shocks everyone when bride cures his paralysis, gave him triplets. She should have agreed, should have nodded politely and signed the papers. Instead, she found herself studying his hands, strong fingers gripping the armrest of his chair, knuckles white with tension. Have you ever made a deal that scared you but felt like your only option? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The billionaire CEO sat in his wheelchair at the altar, unable to feel his legs as his arranged bride walked down the aisle. Both of them strangers marrying for survival. 3 months later, he would be dancing at their baby shower, his legs miraculously restored, while she glowed with triplets nobody saw coming. But the corporate vultures circling his empire had one devastating weapon: DNA test that would either prove his miracle family was real or destroy the love that brought him back to life. What if the person you married to save your reputation became the only one who could save your soul? Have you ever felt trapped by expectations? Ever had to choose between what others wanted and what your heart needed? Tonight, we follow two people who thought love was a luxury they couldn't afford. But can arranged marriage become the greatest love story ever told? Drop a heart if you believe real love can happen in impossible circumstances. Let me take you back to where two worlds collided in the most unexpected way. She signed a marriage contract with steady hands, but her heart was racing, not from love, but from the weight of saving her family's legacy with a man she'd never kissed. Kiera Brooks stared at the papers spread across the mahogany table, each page representing a choice she never thought she'd make. The law office in downtown Savannah reeked of old leather and older money, while outside, Spanish moss dripped from ancient oaks like tears the city had been crying for centuries. Her grandmother's clinic was dying. 3 generations of healing knowledge, passed down through whispered secrets and gentle hands, would disappear with the foreclosure notice tucked in her purse. The bank didn't care about miracles. They wanted cold, hard cash. Miss Brooks, the lawyer's voice cut through her thoughts. Mr. Langston is ready to proceed. Victor Langston, Silicon Valley royalty, tech billionaire, and according to the contract, her future husband. She'd seen his photo in Forbes, sharp jawline, cold eyes, the kind of man who calculated emotions like stock prices. What the magazines didn't show was the wheelchair he'd been confined to since a car accident destroyed his spine 2 years ago. His empire was crumbling too, just in a different way. Bad publicity, hostile takeovers, corporate sharks sensing weakness. He needed respectability. She needed money. It was business, pure and simple. I understand the terms, she said, her southern drawl soft but determined. 6 months of marriage. Public appearances. No, intimitable gastions. The lawyer nodded. Mr. Langston was very specific about that clause. This is purely for image rehabilitation. When Victor rolled his wheelchair closer to the table, Kiera caught her first real look at the man who would wear her grandmother's wedding ring. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with dark hair and eyes that held too much pain for someone so successful. His suit probably cost more than her car, but there was something broken underneath all that expensive fabric. Miss Brooks, his voice was deep, controlled. I want to be clear about expectations. This arrangement benefits us both, but it doesn't require us to pretend feelings that don't exist. She should have agreed, should have nodded politely and signed the papers. Instead, she found herself studying his hands, strong fingers gripping the armrest of his chair, knuckles white with tension. Her grandmother always said you could tell everything about a person from their hands. His told stories of frustration, of a man fighting battles nobody could see. What happened to you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. His jaw tightened. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. I've been told the damage is permanent. The word permanent hung between them like a challenge. Kiera felt the familiar warmth building in her palms. The gift her grandmother had passed down along with the old clinic. The ability to heal with touch, to mend what doctors couldn't fix. It was why the clinic had thrived for decades. Why people drove hundreds of miles for her grandmother's miracle cures. It was also why she could never tell anyone the truth. When he reached across the mahogany table to shake her hand, his fingers lingered a second too long. Warm, strong, completely at odds with the weakness he believed lived in his useless legs. The moment their skin touched, electricity shot through her system. Not attraction, though she'd be lying if she said he wasn't handsome, but something deeper. Her gift recognizing damage it could repair. The ceremony is scheduled for next Friday, he continued, pulling his hand away. My assistant will coordinate your flight to California. California? She'd never been farther west than Atlanta. We'll live in San Francisco. My penthouse. Separate bedrooms, of course. Of course. Because this wasn't about love or even companionship. This was about two desperate people making a deal with the devil. Have you ever made a deal that scared you but felt like your only option? Tell me in the comments what you'd sacrifice to save your family. As she walked to her rental car, contract signed and future sealed, Kiera felt the familiar heat building in her palms, the gift her grandmother passed down. She could heal him, she realized with startling clarity. She could give Victor Langston back his legs, his strength, his life. But did she dare reveal a secret that could change everything? He built walls higher than his San Francisco penthouse, until a Georgia peach with healing hands walked through his front door like she owned the place. The glass elevator climbed 40 floors above the bay, each level taking Kiera further from the red clay roads of home and deeper into a world where emotions were processed like data. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, San Francisco spread out below like a circuit board of lights and ambition. Mr. Langston's penthouse occupies the entire top floor, his assistant, Patricia, explained as they rose. You'll have your own suite on the east side. The household staff has been briefed on the arrangement. Arrangement, not marriage, not partnership, just another business transaction in a city built on them. The elevator doors opened directly into Victor's living space, and Kiera stepped into a world that belonged in architectural magazines. Everything was sharp angles and cold surfaces, marble floors that clicked under her heels, furniture that looked expensive but uninviting, art on the walls that probably cost more than her childhood home. Welcome to your new prison, Victor said from across the room. He was reading financial reports by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view worth millions. In the California light, he looked even more untouchable than he had in that Savannah law office. Feels more like a museum, Kiera replied, setting down her single suitcase. Do people actually live here, or do you just display them for tourists? Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe even amusement. I don't get many tourists. Most people are intimidated by the height. Good thing I'm not most people. She wandered the space, her fingertips trailing across surfaces that had never known a woman's touch. The kitchen looked like something from a spaceship, all steel and glass, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. The living room felt more like a boardroom, with leather furniture arranged for business discussions rather than relaxation. Your grandmother's clinic, Victor said suddenly. What made it special? The question caught her off guard. She'd expected him to ignore her background, to treat her like an accessory he'd purchased. She had a gift for healing. People came from all over Georgia when the hospitals couldn't help them anymore. Alternative medicine, something like that. The lie came easily. She'd been protecting the family's secret her whole life. And you? Do you share her talents? Heat rushed her cheeks. I'm just a nurse. Nothing special about me. But as she spoke, she noticed him watching her hands, the way they moved when she talked, how they seemed to radiate warmth even in the air-conditioned penthouse. Did he suspect? Could he sense what she was hiding? Dinner was served by invisible staff in a dining room that could seat 20 but felt lonely with just 2. Victor ate mechanically, discussing market trends and PR strategies like they were strangers at a business lunch, which Kiera supposed they were. The first public appearance is tomorrow, he said between bites of some dish she couldn't pronounce. Tech Industry Charity Gala. We need to look convincing. Convincing how? Like we're in love. Like this marriage is real. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she sat, married to a man who couldn't feel half his body, while her hands practically hummed with the power to heal him. But revealing her gift would mean explaining her grandmother's legacy, the generations of women who'd possessed abilities that science couldn't explain. After dinner, she insisted on helping him prepare for bed, partially out of genuine concern, but mostly because she needed to touch him to better understand the extent of his injuries. "I can manage," he said stiffly as she moved behind his wheelchair. "I'm sure you can, but I'm a nurse, remember? Let me do what I'm trained for." She pushed his chair toward the master suite, her breath warm against his neck as she leaned forward to navigate the doorway. His shoulders tensed under her proximity, and she caught the slight intake of breath when her fingers brushed his collar. The master bedroom was as cold and impersonal as the rest of the penthouse, but the California King bed looked lonely in all that space. She helped him transfer from chair to mattress, clinical in her movements but hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. "The doctor said there's no feeling below my waist," he said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Doctors are wrong sometimes. Not about this. I've seen the scans. The damage is..." He paused, searching for the word. "Complete." Kiera's hands rested on his shoulders, and she could feel the tension there, the weight he carried every day. But underneath that, something else, nerve pathways that weren't quite dead, connections that could be rebuilt with the right touch, the right energy. What's harder, loving someone who won't let you in or hiding who you really are? Share your thoughts below. That night, as she helped him settle in a bed, her hands glowed faintly with warmth he shouldn't have been able to feel, but somehow, impossibly, he did. His eyes widened in the darkness as sensation flickered through nerve endings that had been silent for 2 years. "Did you just get some sleep?" she whispered, backing away from the bed. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." But as she closed the door between their rooms, both of them knew that something fundamental had shifted. The arrangement was becoming something else entirely, something neither of them had planned for, something that could save them both, or destroy everything they thought they knew about love, healing, and the space between strangers who were no longer quite so strange to each other. Their wedding was a business transaction broadcast live, but what happened in the shadows afterward would rewrite both their destinies. The ceremony took place on a private terrace overlooking San Francisco Bay, with enough media coverage to trend worldwide within hours. Kiera stood at the altar in a dress that cost more than her grandmother's clinic made in a month, smiling for cameras while her heart hammered against her ribs. Victor looked handsome in his custom tuxedo, every inch the powerful CO despite the wheelchair. But when he took her hand for the vows, she felt the slight tremor in his fingers. Nerves or something deeper? "Do you, Victor Langston, take Kiera to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "Ido." His voice carried across the terrace, strong and certain for the cameras. "And do you, Kiera Brooks, take Victor to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She looked into his eyes, searching for something real beneath all the performance. "Ido." The kiss was brief, appropriate for the cameras, but electric enough to send heat racing through her bloodstream. When they separated, his eyes held a question he couldn't ask in front of 500 guests and a dozen news crews. The reception blurred past in a whirlwind of champagne toasts and congratulations from Silicon Valley royalty. Everyone wanted to shake hands with the mysterious Southern nurse who'd captured the tech world's most eligible bachelor. If they only knew the truth, that she was there to save his reputation while her healing hands ached to save something far more important. By midnight, they were finally alone in the penthouse. The bridal suite overlooked San Francisco Bay, city lights twinkling like fallen stars. But inside, two strangers faced the most intimate moment of their carefully orchestrated lives. "That went well," Victor said, loosening his tie. The press seemed convinced. Convinced of what? That we're madly in love. Kiera kicked off her heels, sighing as her feet touched the cool marble floor. "Or that you married me for damage control. Does it matter? We both got what we needed." But as she watched him struggle with his cufflinks, frustration etched in every line of his body, Kiera realized that what she needed had changed somewhere between the altar and this moment. She needed to heal him, not for the arrangement, not for the contract, but because watching him suffer was becoming physically painful for her. "Let me help you," she said softly. He stilled as she approached, her fingers working the platinum links with steady hands. This close, she could smell his cologne, expensive but warm, completely at odds with his cold exterior. When she moved to help him out of his jacket, their eyes met in the reflection of the bedroom's wall of windows. Kiera. Her name sounded different in his voice. Less like a business partner, more like something precious he was afraid to break. "What happened to separate bedrooms?" she whispered. "I don't know." Her hands rested against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart through expensive fabric. The healing energy was building in her palms, warm and insistent, begging to be released. She could fix this. She could give him back everything the accident had taken. "I need to tell you something," she began. "So do I." They spoke at the same time, then laughed. The first genuine moment they'd shared since meeting. But laughter faded as the weight of unspoken truths settled between them. "You first," Victor said. Kiera took a breath that felt like stepping off a cliff. "My grandmother's healing abilities, they weren't alternative medicine. They were real, genetic, and I inherited them." His voice was matter-of-fact, as if she just told him the weather forecast. "You knew. I suspected. The way you look at me sometimes, like you're seeing damage that could be repaired. The warmth in your hands when you touch me. And yesterday," he paused, his jaw working as he searched for words. "I felt something. For just a moment, sensation where there shouldn't be any." She helped him out of his tuxedo with clinical gentleness, but when her fingers traced the scar along his spine, something electric passed between them. Part healing energy, part pure desire. His sharp intake of breath told her he felt it too. "The doctors said permanent," he said, but his voice held hope for the first time since she'd met him. "Doctors don't know everything." Her hands moved along his spine, finding the precise location where nerves have been severed but not destroyed. The healing energy flowed from her fingertips like liquid fire, seeking pathways that could be rebuilt, connections that could be restored. He pulled her down onto the bed beside him, unable to feel his legs, but hypersensitive everywhere else. "I can't give you everything," he whispered against her throat, his hands tangling in her hair. "Then give me what you can," she breathed back, her healing touch working deeper into his damaged nerves while her body responded to the hunger in his eyes. "Have you ever had to be vulnerable with someone you barely knew? Bit like if you've taken that leap of faith." Their first kiss tasted like champagne and possibility. His mouth was demanding despite his vulnerability, and she met his passion with her own growing desire. When her healing hands pressed against his lower back, working their mysterious warmth into dead nerve endings, his whole body shuddered with sensation he shouldn't have been able to feel. "What are you doing to me?" he gasped against her neck. "Healing you, if you'll let me." As she worked her gift along his spine, pouring energy into damaged pathways, his toe twitched, barely visible movement, but they both saw it. His eyes went wide with shock and something that looked dangerously like hope. "Did you just—" he started. "Don't get your hopes up," she whispered, but her smile said everything. "Healing takes time. But Victor, I think I can help you." That night, they held each other in the California king bed that no longer seemed too big, talking in whispers about miracles and possibilities while the city sparkled below them. For the first time since his accident, Victor dared to dream about walking again. And for the first time in her life, Kiera allowed herself to imagine what it would feel like to be loved, not for what she could give, but for who she was. Neither of them knew that outside, paparazzi with telephoto lenses were already capturing images that would make their fake marriage look convincingly real. Or that in corporate boardrooms across the city, enemies were planning their next move against a man they believed was weak. But in the darkness of their shared bed, with healing energy flowing between them like a bridge across the space that had separated them just hours before, Victor Langston and Kiera Brooks began to discover that some arrangements become something much more dangerous. Something that felt surprisingly like falling in love. She told him not to get his hopes up, but hope was already flooding through him like electricity through dead wires. Victor woke before dawn with sensation tingling through his legs. Not full feeling, but something that hadn't existed for 2 years. Beside him, Kiera slept with one hand resting on his spine, her touch warm even in sleep. He stared at the ceiling, afraid to move and break whatever spell she'd woven. "I can feel that," he whispered to the darkness. Her eyes opened immediately. "Feel what?" "Your hand. On my back. It's warm." She sat up carefully, her wedding dress from a night before replaced by one of his t-shirts that hung to her thighs. In a pre-dawn light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she looked younger, softer, less like the determined woman who'd signed a contract, and more like someone who could work miracles. "Can you move them?" "Your legs." He concentrated, sending signals down nerve pathways that had been silent since the accident. His right foot shifted slightly against the sheets, not much but enough to make. "Language," she teased, but her smile was radiant. "It's working." The private gym in his penthouse became their sanctuary over the following weeks, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Golden Gate Bridge, while she worked miracles his doctors said were impossible. Every morning, she'd place her hands on his spine and channel healing energy into damaged nerves. Every afternoon, they'd work through physical therapy exercises that grew more promising each day. "Don't push too hard," she cautioned during one session, watching him strain to lift his leg against gravity. "Healing isn't something you can rush. I've been patient for 2 years. I think I've earned the right to be impatient now." Each therapy session grew more intimate, her hands mapping his body, searching for responsive nerves, both of them breathing harder than the exercises required. The clinical distance they'd maintained was crumbling as his recovery progressed, and their fake marriage felt increasingly real. "The board meeting is next week," he said during one evening session, his legs now responding to basic commands. "They'll want to see progress reports, medical documentation. What will you tell them?" "That I'm getting better. They don't need to know how." But keeping her gift secret was becoming harder as his improvement accelerated beyond medical explanation. His personal doctor had run every test imaginable, searching for reasons why a man with complete spinal cord damage was regaining function. The results always came back the same: impossible but happening. "We need to be careful," Kiera warned. "People are starting to ask questions." She was right. His household staff whispered about the mysterious Southern nurse who'd brought their boss back to life. Business associates commented on his improved mood, his renewed energy. Even Patricia, his unflappable assistant, had raised an eyebrow when he'd walked 3 steps from his wheelchair to his desk. "Let them question," Victor said, pulling himself upright on the parallel bars they'd installed in the gym. "I don't care what anyone thinks anymore." That was the night everything changed between them. He'd been working late in his study, reviewing contracts, when she appeared in the doorway, wearing nothing but silk pajamas that clung to curves he tried not to notice. "You should be sleeping," she said softly. "So should you." She crossed the room and began massaging his shoulders, working out tension from hours hunched over financial reports. But when her hands moved lower, tracing the line of his spine with practiced familiarity, the touch became something else entirely. "Kiera." Her name was a warning and a plea. "What?" But her voice was breathless, her hands still working their magic against his skin. He spun his chair to face her, catching her wrists in his hands. The healing energy flowed between them, but so did something deeper. Desire that had been building for weeks, attraction that transcended their business arrangement. What would you do if you could heal someone, but revealing your gift might destroy your life? Drop your answer below. When he stood up from his wheelchair for the first time in 2 years, just for 5 seconds, but long enough to cup her face in his hands, she caught him as his legs gave out, and the kiss that followed was anything but arranged. It tasted like triumph and desperation, like 2 people who'd found something neither expected to want. His hands tangled in her hair, while hers pressed against his chest, feeling his heartbeat race beneath her palms. "This is complicated," she whispered against his mouth. "Everything worthwhile is." They made it to his bedroom, her supporting his unsteady steps while he refused to let go of her hand. The bed that had felt like neutral territory the night before now seemed charged with possibility. "Are you sure?" he asked, settling her beside him on the mattress. Instead of answering with words, she straddled his lap and kissed him with a hunger that matched his own. Her healing hands worked their magic while her body pressed against his, and for the first time since his accident, Victor felt completely alive. Later, as they lay tangled in expensive sheets with the Golden Gate Bridge glowing red in the distance, he realized that somewhere between signing contracts and sharing secrets, he'd fallen in love with his fake wife. The reporter called again today, Kiera said quietly, tracing patterns on his chest. "She's asking questions about my family, about the clinic." Victor's arms tightened around her. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that could expose everything. My grandmother's reputation, the healing abilities, why you're recovering when medical science says you shouldn't be. Then we'll deal with it, together." But even as he said the words, they both knew their secret was becoming harder to keep. Victor's recovery was too dramatic, too complete to explain away. And in a city built on information and leverage, secrets had a way of becoming weapons in the wrong hands. The investigative reporter's call came during breakfast the next morning, shattering their peaceful moment. "Mrs. Langston, we have some questions about your husband's miraculous recovery and about certain unusual abilities that run in your family." As Kiera listened to the woman's probing questions, Victor watched color drain from her face. Their honeymoon period was over. Now, they'd have to decide whether their love was strong enough to survive the spotlight that was about to illuminate every shadow they tried to hide. Every night, she healed his body, and every morning they pretended to be strangers, until the morning he walked into the kitchen on his own 2 feet. Kiera was making coffee when she heard footsteps behind her. Actual footsteps, not the whisper of wheelchair wheels on marble. She turned to find Victor standing in the kitchen doorway, fully dressed and grinning like a man who'd just conquered Mount Everest. "Good morning, wife," he said, his voice rich with satisfaction. The coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. "Victor, you're walking." "Yes, thanks to you." He crossed the room with careful but determined steps, glass crunching under his dress shoes. "Don't worry about the mess. I'll buy you 1,000 mugs if it means I can keep doing this." Morning fog rolled across the bay like nature's curtain, giving them privacy in their glass tower as they discovered what it meant to touch without pretense. He cornered her against the marble counter, his hands braced on either side of her, his newly mobile body pressing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Is this real?" he asked, meaning his legs, meaning the heat between them, meaning everything that had changed since that night she'd signed a contract to save her family. She answered by pulling him down for a kiss that tasted like possibility and morning coffee, her healing hands finding their way under his shirt to trace the spine that no longer imprisoned him. His sharp intake of breath told her exactly how real this was becoming. "The physical therapy appointments," she murmured against his mouth. "What will you tell Dr. Martinez? That miracles happen." His lips found the sensitive spot behind her ear that made her knees weak. "Or that I have exceptional motivation to recover." But even as they celebrated his progress, both knew their secret was living on borrowed time. Victor's improvement was too dramatic, too complete to explain with conventional medicine. His corporate enemies were already asking questions, and that investigative reporter was getting closer to answers neither of them wanted to give. The board meeting that afternoon felt like walking into a shark tank. Victor entered the conference room on his own power, sending shockwaves through the assembled executives who'd been circling his company like vultures for months. "Gentlemen," he said, taking his seat at the head of the polished table, "I believe we have some business to discuss." James Morrison, his oldest rival, leaned forward with predatory interest. "Victor, you look remarkably well for someone who was wheelchair-bound 6 months ago. Modern medicine is full of surprises." "Indeed. Perhaps you'd like to share the details of this miraculous recovery? Our shareholders would be fascinated to know what experimental treatments you've been pursuing." The room went silent, except for the quiet hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of San Francisco traffic 44s below. Victor felt Kiera's absence like a phantom limb. She was at the penthouse, monitoring news coverage of his company, but he wished she were here to lend him strength. "My medical records are private," he said carefully, "but I'm happy to demonstrate my fitness to lead this company." For the next 2 hours, he fielded questions about quarterly reports, market projections, and strategic partnerships with the sharp focus that had built his empire. But underneath every business discussion lurked the unspoken question: how did a man with permanent spinal cord damage walk into this room? When the meeting ended, Victor felt drained but victorious. He'd retained control of his board and proven his competence to lead. But as he waited for the elevator, Morrison cornered him with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Impressive performance today," the older man said. "But performance is the key word, isn't it? I wonder what the medical community would think of your wife's unique background." Ice flooded Victor's veins. "What are you talking about?" "Small-town clinic in Georgia. Reputation for miraculous healing. 3 generations of women with very unusual abilities. It makes a man wonder what kind of treatment you've really been receiving at home." The elevator arrived before Victor could respond, but Morrison's parting words followed him down 40 floors. "Secrets have a way of coming to light, Victor, especially when there's so much at stake." That evening, Victor found Kiera on the penthouse terrace, staring out at the Golden Gate Bridge with worry etched in every line of her body. The city sparkled below them, but the beauty felt fragile, like something that could be shattered with the wrong word, the wrong revelation. "They know," he said simply. She didn't turn around. "How much?" "Enough to be dangerous. Morrison mentioned your family's reputation, the clinic. It's only a matter of time before they connect the dots." When she finally faced him, tears sparkled in her eyes like the city lights reflected in the bay. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have stayed in Savannah, should have found another way to save the clinic." He crossed the terrace in quick strides, his recovered mobility allowing him to reach her faster than she could retreat. "Don't apologize for giving me my life back. But if they expose us, then we face it together." His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears that tasted like salt and fear. "I'm not losing you. Not to corporate politics, not to media vultures, not to anyone. When was the last time someone you love fight for everything they believed in? How'd it make you feel? Share below." That night, they made love with desperate intensity, both knowing their time in the shadows was ending. Her hands glowed faintly with healing energy while his body responded with superhuman sensitivity, nerve endings firing with pleasure that should have been impossible just months before. "Whatever happens," she whispered against his chest afterward, "I don't regret any of this. Even if we lose everything, we won't lose each other. That's all that matters." But as they held each other in the darkness, both wondered if love would be enough to survive the storm that was coming. Outside their penthouse sanctuary, enemies were gathering evidence. Reporters were digging deeper, and somewhere in the city's glittering landscape of ambition and betrayal, someone was preparing to destroy everything they'd built. The pregnancy test Kiera took the next morning showed 2 pink lines, but the ultrasound 3 weeks later revealed something that would change everything. 3 heartbeats, not 1. Their secret was about to get much more complicated. They thought their secret was safe behind penthouse walls, until a reporter with too many questions and too much evidence knocked on their door. The investigative journalist's name was Rebecca Chun, and she had the kind of reputation that made corporate lawyers break out in cold sweats. When she showed up at Victor's office building with a camera crew and a list of questions, security called upstairs immediately. "Mr. Langston, there's a Channel 7 news team in the lobby asking about your wife's medical background," Patricia said through the intercom. "Should I have them escorted out?" Victor looked up from the quarterly reports spread across his desk. 3 months of marriage, and his world had gone from black and white to full color. His legs worked perfectly now, his company was thriving, and Kiera was carrying his children, plural, as they discovered just that morning. Life had never been better, which meant it was probably about to get much worse. "Tell them I'm not available for comment." "Sir, they're not leaving. Ms. Chun says she has documents about your wife's family that you'd want to see before they air tonight." The threat was clear. "Talk to us now, or we'll destroy you on live television." "Send them up," The boardroom felt like a gladiator arena 30 minutes later. Suits and ties masking the bloodthirsty faces of men who'd sell their own mothers for market vantage. Rebecca Chun sat across from Victor with the confidence of someone holding all the cards, her camera operator setting up in the corner while her producer shuffled through a thick folder of papers. "Mr. Langston, thank you for agreeing to speak with us," she began, her voice professionally neutral. "We're investigating claims about your wife's unusual medical background. My wife is a registered nurse from Georgia. There's nothing unusual about that. Perhaps, but her grandmother, Viola Brooks, had quite a reputation in Savannah. People drove hundreds of miles to visit her clinic for treatments that mainstream medicine couldn't provide. Miraculous healings, they called them. Cancer patients who recovered overnight. Paralyzed individuals who walked again after a single visit." Victor kept his expression blank, but inside, alarm bells were screaming. Folk medicine has a long history in the South. People believe what they want to believe. What about this? Rebecca slid a photograph across the mahogany table. It showed a much younger Kiera standing beside her grandmother outside a small clinic, both of them with their hands placed on a man in a wheelchair. This was taken 5 years ago. The man in the chair had been paralyzed in a construction accident. According to witnesses, he walked out of that clinic 2 hours later. The photo might as well have been a smoking gun. Victor studied it carefully, noting the family resemblance between Kiera and her grandmother, the way their hands seemed to glow slightly in the afternoon sunlight. Or maybe that was just a trick of the camera. "Interesting story," he said finally. "I'm sure there's a logical explanation. I'm sure there is. Just like there's a logical explanation for your own miraculous recovery." Rebecca leaned forward, her eyes bright with the thrill of the hunt. "6 months ago, you were permanently confined to a wheelchair. Today, you walked into this building on your own power. Your doctors have no medical explanation for this improvement. Modern medicine is constantly evolving. New treatments, new technologies, new wives with very special gifts." The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Victor thought of Kiera at home, probably watching the news coverage of his company, unaware that their carefully constructed life was about to explode across every screen in America. "My personal medical information is protected by privacy laws," he said carefully. "Of course, but public interest in miraculous recoveries tends to override privacy concerns, especially when there's evidence of fraud or deception involved." "What are you implying?" Rebecca smiled like a shark scenting blood. "I'm implying that your marriage might not be the love story your PR team has been selling. Corporate arranged marriages aren't uncommon in your circles, especially when both parties have something to gain. You needed positive publicity after your accident damaged your company's stock price. She needed money to save her family's failing clinic. You're fishing. Am I? Because I have copies of the financial transfers. $50 million moved from your personal accounts to pay off the clinic's debts, settle your wife's family obligations, even purchase that beautiful antique engagement ring she's been wearing in all the publicity photos." Victor's blood ran cold. The money trail was damning enough, but the engagement ring detail meant they'd been watching Kiera, following her movements, documenting their private moments. "The transfers were wedding gifts," he said. "It's customary for a husband to help his wife's family. $50 million worth of help. For a woman you'd known for exactly 6 days before the wedding." Rebecca's smile widened. "Come now, Mr. Langston. We both know this marriage was a business transaction. The question is whether her healing abilities are real, or if you're both running an elaborate con. Have you ever had someone fight for your reputation when it mattered most? Tag that person below." The meeting ended with Rebecca promising to air her story within 24 hours, giving Victor time to consider his response to her allegations. As soon as the news crew left, he called his car service and raced home to the penthouse, his mind spinning with damage control strategies and worst-case scenarios. He found Kiera in the nursery they'd started setting up, hanging curtains that would never be needed if Rebecca Chun destroyed their lives on national television. She looked radiant in the afternoon light, her hand resting protectively over the slight curve where their triplets were growing, completely unaware that enemies were closing in on all sides. "How was your day?" she asked, not looking up from the curtain rod. "Complicated. We need to talk." The tone of his voice made her turn, and when she saw his face, the color drained from her cheeks. "What happened?" He told her everything. The reporter's evidence, the photographs, the financial records that made their marriage look like a carefully orchestrated fraud. With each revelation, she grew paler, her hand pressed tighter against her stomach, as if she could protect their unborn children from the storm that was coming. "They can't prove anything," she said when he finished. "The healing, it's not something that shows up on tests or scans. It's just energy, just touch. The photo of you and your grandmother shows something. The way your hands look in the light. That could be anything. Sanlot, cameratrix, coincidencia." But they both knew that in the court of public opinion, coincidence was often enough to destroy lives. The pregnancy test demand arrived via courier the next morning. Corporate lawyers claiming the children couldn't be his due to his previous medical condition. Victor's response would either save their family or destroy everything they'd built. Rebecca Chen's story would air in 18 hours. By then, the whole world would be asking the same question that was keeping Victor awake at night. Was the love that saved his life real, or just another Silicon Valley scam designed to fool investors and steal millions? The answer might not matter if they couldn't prove it before the cameras started rolling. She thought the hardest part was hiding her healing gift, until she had to hide 3 babies from a world that would tear them apart to prove their father was a fraud. The ultrasound appointment was supposed to be routine. A quick check to confirm the pregnancy that had already turned their world upside down. Instead, Dr. Sarah Martinez stared at the screen with the kind of expression that made expectant parents hold their breath. "Is everything okay?" Kiera asked, her hand finding Victor's automatically. They'd driven to the Palo Alto Medical Center in his Tesla, windows tinted dark enough to avoid the paparazzi who'd been following them since Rebecca Chen's story started making rounds. "Everything is exceptional," Dr. Martinez said slowly. "Mr. and Mrs. Langston, you're having triplets." The room went dead silent, except for the steady thump, thump, thump of 3 heartbeats coming through the ultrasound speakers. On the screen, 3 tiny figures floated in perfect formation, like they were already planning their synchronized arrival into the world. "Triplets." Victor's voice cracked on the word. 3 healthy babies. Based on their development, I'd say you conceived around your wedding night, which makes the timing quite remarkable given your previous medical condition, Mr. Langston. The doctor's words carried weight beyond their medical significance. Victor had been paralyzed for 2 years before meeting Kiera. His recovery had been so complete that even his fertility had returned to normal levels. Another miracle that would be impossible to explain if the story went public. "How common are triplets?" Kiera asked, though she was thinking about genetics, about healing gifts that might pass from mother to children, about 3 babies who could inherit abilities that science couldn't explain. Naturally occurring triplets happen in about 1 in 10,000 pregnancies. But given your family's medical history, Dr. Martinez paused, consulting her notes. Your grandmother had a reputation for unusual healing abilities, correct? Heat rushed to Kiera's cheeks. She was a good nurse. People trusted her, I'm sure. It's just interesting how healing gifts often run in families, especially among women. There are documented cases of genetic markers that affect cellular regeneration, energy transfer between individuals. She was fishing, just like the reporter. In a city built on information and leverage, everyone was looking for the secret behind Victor's recovery and Kiera's mysterious background. "We should go," Victor said, helping Kiera off the examination table. "Thank you for the confirmation, Dr. Martinez." But as they left the medical center, both knew their secret had just gotten 3 times more complicated. The doctor's office in Palo Alto hummed with high-tech equipment, but all that mattered were the 3 tiny figures dancing on the ultrasound screen like miracles in black and white. Driving home, they sat in stunned silence. The ultrasound photos scattered across Kiera's lap like evidence of impossible blessings. 3, Victor said finally, his voice filled with wonder and terror. "I know. What if they inherit your abilities? What if they're born with healing powers that we can't hide or explain? It was a question that had been keeping Kiera awake since she'd first felt the familiar warmth building in her palms around Victor. Her grandmother had always said the gift chose its recipients, usually skipping generations, almost always manifesting in women. But 3 children meant 3 chances for the genetic lottery to hit, 3 potential healers who would grow up in a world that didn't believe in miracles. "We'll figure it out," she said, though she had no idea how. That night, he worshipped her changing body with reverent touches, his hands covering her still flat stomach where 3 lives were growing stronger every day. The healing energy flowed between them stronger than ever, as if pregnancy had amplified her abilities. 3, he whispered against her skin, voice filled with amazement. "We made 3, she arched beneath his touch, both of them marveling at the life multiplying inside her, at the impossible mathematics of their love. When he moved inside her, she felt power building in ways she'd never experienced. Not just healing energy, but creative force, the same mysterious current that had restored his spine, now nurturing 3 new souls. "I love you," he said afterward, holding her close while San Francisco sparkled below their bedroom windows. "I love you too, all of you." It was the first time either had spoken the words aloud, and they hung in the darkness like a promise neither knew if they could keep. What's the biggest surprise that completely changed your life plans? Tell me about it in the comments. The charity gala was in 2 weeks, their first major public appearance since the wedding. She'd be showing by then, her body unable to hide the pregnancy that would make headlines across the country. But first, they had to survive the corporate vultures who were already circling, sensing weakness in Victor's distraction and joy. James Morrison called the next morning with barely concealed excitement in his voice. "Victor, congratulations on the pregnancy announcement. Though I have to say, the timing raises some interesting questions." "What kind of questions, James?" "Medical ones. Fertility specialists will tell you that men with your type of spinal injury rarely recover full reproductive function. Yet here you are, not only walking again, but apparently quite virile. It's almost like you were never really injured at all." The implication was clear. Either Victor's paralysis had been fake from the beginning, or something else was responsible for his miraculous recovery. Either way, it painted their marriage as a fraud designed to manipulate stock prices and public opinion. "I'm hanging up now, James. Think about it, Victor. 3 babies means 3 times the media attention, 3 times the scrutiny, 3 times the chances for someone to notice that your children might have inherited some very unusual traits from their mother's side of the family." The line went dead, but Morrison's words echoed in Victor's mind as he watched Kiera sleep peacefully beside him. She was right. They couldn't prove her healing abilities existed, but they also couldn't prove they didn't exist, and in the court of public opinion, suspicion was often enough to destroy everything. The board meeting was scheduled for tomorrow morning. The media storm would break tomorrow night, and somewhere in between, they had to decide whether to fight for their privacy or surrender to the spotlight that was already burning away the shadows where they'd built their love. When the votes were counted, Victor retained control, but the victory celebration was cut short by paparazzi photos showing Kiera's rounded silhouette leaving the medical center. The secret was out, and the whole world was about to learn that the cold, untouchable CEO and his mysterious Southern wife were about to become parents. 3 times over, he walked into that boardroom on legs they thought were useless forever, ready to fight for his empire. But the real battle was for his family's future. The 42nd floor conference room overlooked Silicon Valley's sprawling campus of dreams and destroyed careers, morning light cutting through floor-to-ceiling glass like Judgment Day. Victor arrived 15 minutes early, knowing his enemies would already be there, plotting his downfall with the same precision they used to destroy startups and steal market share. They didn't disappoint. James Morrison sat at the far end of the polished table, surrounded by 3 other board members who'd been vocal about their concerns regarding Victor's fitness to lead since his accident. Their heads bent together in whispered conversation that stopped the moment Victor entered the room. "Gentlemen," he said, walking to his seat with the confident stride of a man who'd fought his way back from hell. "I believe we have some business to discuss." Morrison's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Indeed we do, Victor. Though I have to say, you look remarkably well for someone whose medical condition was supposedly so limiting." "I'm feeling much better, thank you." "I'm sure you are. In fact, your recovery has been quite the topic of conversation among our shareholders. They're fascinated by the idea that a man with permanent spinal cord damage could not only walk again, but apparently father children as well." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Every face around the table turned toward Victor with predatory interest, waiting to see how he'd respond to the challenge. "My personal life isn't relevant to this company's performance, isn't it?" Morrison slid a folder across the table. "Because according to these medical reports, obtained quite legally through our corporate insurance provider, your original diagnosis was clear. Complete severance of the spinal cord at the T12 vertebra. No possibility of recovery. No chance of regaining motor function. And certainly no likelihood of restored fertility." Victor opened the folder, recognizing his own medical record from the months following his accident. The doctors have been brutally honest about his prognosis. Permanent paralysis, lifelong disability, the end of any hope for a normal life. Reading their clinical assessments now, he remembered the despair that had consumed him before Kiera walked into his world. "Medical science evolves," he said carefully. "New treatments, experimental procedures." "What experimental procedures?" Morrison interrupted. "Because according to these same records, you refused all suggested treatments. No surgery, no experimental drugs, no clinical trials. You sat in that wheelchair for 2 years doing absolutely nothing to improve your condition. Then you married a nurse from Georgia, and suddenly you're walking around like nothing ever happened." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Around the table, board members shifted in their chairs, some looking uncomfortable with Morrison's aggressive tactics, others nodding in agreement with his implications. "Are you suggesting my recovery is somehow fraudulent?" Victor asked. "I'm suggesting that miraculous healings don't happen without explanation. Either your original diagnosis was wrong, which would make our insurance payouts fraudulent, or you found some alternative treatment that you're keeping secret from the medical community. Or," added Patricia Holbrook, another longtime board member, "your recovery is connected to your wife's rather unusual family background." Victor's blood ran cold. They'd been investigating Kiera, digging into her grandmother's reputation, probably talking to people in Savannah who remembered the old clinic and its miraculous cures. "My wife's family has nothing to do with my medical condition, doesn't it?" Morrison produced another document. This one a printout from some medical journal Victor had never heard of. There are documented cases of genetic healing abilities, particularly among women in certain family lines. Energy transfer, cellular regeneration, neural pathway restoration, all theoretical, of course, but fascinating reading. The document was legitimate research, peer-reviewed and published by respected scientists. Reading the abstract, Victor felt sweat beading on his forehead as he recognized descriptions that perfectly matched what Kiera did with her hands every night, the warm energy that had rebuilt his damaged nerves and restored his strength. "This is science fiction," he said. "Is it? Because if such abilities existed, if your wife possessed them, it would explain everything. Your recovery, your marriage, even your current fertility." Morrison's smile widened as he played his final card. "Tell me, Victor, when did you first feel sensation returning to your legs? Was it before or after your wedding night?" The question was a trap, and Victor knew it. Answer honestly, and he'd confirm their suspicions about Kiera's abilities. Lie, and they'd produce evidence that contradicted his story. Either way, he'd be admitting that his recovery was connected to his marriage. "My medical recovery is documented by licensed physicians," he said instead. "Everything else is speculation." Perhaps. But speculation has a way of becoming fact when there's enough money at stake. Morrison stood, straightening his tie like a man who'd just won a poker game. "The board will be voting on your continued leadership next week. I suggest you spend the time preparing explanations that will satisfy our shareholders' questions about your miraculous circumstances." He defended her in the boardroom with fierce intensity, and that night she showed her gratitude with passionate surrender, their bodies communicating what words couldn't express. Have you ever watched someone you love fight for everything they believed in? How did it make you feel? Share below. The meeting ended with Victor retaining nominal control, but barely. 3 board members had openly questioned his fitness to lead, and Morrison's faction was growing stronger with each revelation about Kiera's background. Walking back to his office, Victor realized that winning the battle might have cost him the war. Patricia, his assistant, was waiting with a stack of messages and an expression that meant more bad news. "The reporters are calling every 10 minutes, she said. "Something about pregnancy announcements and medical impossibilities. And your wife called. She's at home watching the news coverage." Victor closed his office door and pulled up the financial networks on his computer. His company's stock had dropped 12% since morning, with analysts citing uncertainty about leadership stability and questions regarding CEO's medical claims. The headlines were even worse: miracle recovery or elaborate fraud, and Silicon Valley's most mysterious marriage. When he finally made it home that evening, he found Kiera on the terrace, staring out at the Golden Gate Bridge with her hands pressed protectively over her growing belly. The city sparkled below them, but the beauty felt fragile, like something that could shatter if the wrong person asked the wrong question. "They voted to keep you?" she asked without turning around. "For now. But Morrison has 3 allies, and he's working on convincing the others. And if he succeeds, then I lose control of the company I built. We lose the financial security that protects us from people who want to exploit your abilities." She turned to face him then, tears glittering in her eyes like reflected starlight. "Maybe we should just tell the truth. Prove that the healing is real. Show them what I can do. And then what? You become a laboratory experiment? Our children grow up in government facilities being studied like specimens." He crossed the terrace and pulled her into his arms, feeling the slight roundness where their triplets were growing. "We're not trading our family's freedom for my company." When the votes were counted, Victor retained control, but the victory celebration was cut short by paparazzi photos showing Kiera's rounded silhouette. The secret was out. The pregnancy announcement would be front-page news by morning, complete with medical speculation about fertility miracles and genetic impossibilities. Their love story was becoming a public spectacle, and the spotlight was only getting brighter. But in Victor's arms, with San Francisco glittering below them and 3 new lives growing between them, Kiera felt something stronger than fear. She felt determination. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, CEO and healer, businessman and miracle worker, 2 people who'd found love in the most impossible circumstances. The real battle was just beginning. The world discovered she was pregnant the same day they questioned whether the babies were even his. And suddenly their love story became everyone's business. The paparazzi photos hit every major news outlet simultaneously at 6 a.m. Pacific time. Kiera leaving the Palo Alto Medical Center with ultrasound images clutched in her hand, her designer maternity top doing nothing to hide the obvious curve of early pregnancy. Victor's protective arm around her waist, his face a mask of controlled fury as camera flashes exploded around them like lightning. By 7 a.m., the story had gone viral. #LangstonBaby was trending worldwide, complete with medical experts debating the likelihood of pregnancy in men with Victor's previous condition. By 8 a.m., reporters were camped outside their building, creating a media circus that shut down 2 city blocks. "Mrs. Langston, is it true you're having triplets? Mr. Langston, how do you explain your fertility recovery? Any comment on claims that your wife has supernatural healing abilities?" Paparazzi lined the sidewalks like vultures outside their building, camera flashes exploding like lightning every time they appeared, turning their private joy into public spectacle. The building's security team had cordoned off the main entrance, but telephoto lenses captured every movement behind the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse. Victor stood in his home office, watching the chaos unfold 40 floors below while fielding calls from his legal team, his PR specialists, and board members who were either celebrating or panicking, depending on their loyalties. The stock is up 18%, his CFO reported. Investors are interpreting the pregnancy as proof of your complete recovery, and the negative coverage balanced out by public support. Social media is split between people calling it a miracle and others demanding medical explanations. Kiera appeared in the doorway, wearing one of his shirts over leggings, her hand pressed protectively over her stomach. The morning sickness had been brutal lately. Apparently, carrying 3 babies amplified every pregnancy symptom, but she looked radiant despite the chaos surrounding them. Rebecca Chen's office called, she said. They want to schedule an exclusive interview about the pregnancy and your recovery. Absolutely not. Victor, maybe it's time to control the narrative. Tell our story before someone else tells it for us. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, inhaling the scent of her shampoo mixed with the subtle energy that always surrounded her healing touch. Outside, helicopters circled their building like mechanical buzzards, but inside their sanctuary, he could almost forget the world was watching. What story would we tell? That I married you for PR damage control and accidentally fell in love? That you healed my spine with genetic abilities that science can't explain? That we're having 3 babies who might inherit powers that could make them targets for the rest of their lives? We could tell them that sometimes love happens in unexpected ways, she said softly. That healing comes in many forms. That miracles are possible when 2 people choose each other. That night, surrounded by media chaos, they found peace in each other's arms. He kissed her growing belly, whispering promises to their unborn children while she ran her healing hands through his hair, both of them blocking out the world outside their bedroom windows. Whatever happens, he murmured against her skin, I need you to know that you saved me. Not just my legs, my whole life. You saved me too, she whispered back. Gave me a chance to use my gift for love instead of survival. How do you protect your happiness when everyone has an opinion about your life? Share your strategy in the comments. But their private moment was interrupted by Victor's phone buzzing with an emergency call from his head of security. Corporate lawyers were in the lobby with court documents that would change everything. The DNA test demands arrive via courier the next morning. Corporate lawyers claiming the children couldn't be his due to his previous medical condition. The legal papers were thick with medical terminology and accusations, but the message was clear. Prove paternity or face fraud charges that could destroy both his company and their marriage. They're questioning whether the babies are mine, Victor said, staring at the legal documents spread across their kitchen island. Based on what? Medical impossibility. Men with my type of injury don't typically recover fertility function. They're claiming either my diagnosis was fake from the beginning, or that the pregnancy is the result of artificial insemination or infidelity. Kiera sank into one of the bar stools, her face pale with exhaustion and stress. So we proved them wrong. Blood tests, DNA analysis, whatever they need. It's not that simple. Proving paternity confirms that my recovery was complete, which raises questions about how that happened. If we can't explain the healing, then they'll keep digging until they find the truth about my abilities. They were trapped in a catch-22. Prove the babies were his and invite medical scrutiny that could expose her gifts, or refuse testing and let the world believe their marriage was built on lies. The press conference was scheduled for that afternoon. Victor's PR team had arranged a controlled environment, a hotel ballroom with selected reporters and prepared statements. But as they sat in the green room beforehand, both knew that no amount of media training could prepare them for the questions that were coming. Mr. and Mrs. Langston. Rebecca Chen appeared in the doorway like a shark scenting blood. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us today. We haven't agreed to anything beyond a basic statement, Victor replied. Of course, but I think you'll want to see this before we go on camera. She handed him a manila envelope thick with photographs and documents. We've been investigating your wife's family history more thoroughly. The results are illuminating. Victor opened the envelope with steady hands, but inside his heart was racing. The photos showed Kiera's grandmother working in the old clinic, her hands glowing with the same faint energy Victor had seen in his wife's touch. Medical records from patients who'd experienced impossible recoveries. Testimonials from people claiming miraculous healings. "Where did you get these?" Kiera asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Public records, mostly. Your grandmother never tried to hide what she could do. She just lived in a time and place where people accepted mysteries they couldn't explain." Rebecca's smile was triumphant. But this isn't rural Georgia in the 1980s. This is Silicon Valley in the age of social media and scientific scrutiny. People want explanations. And if we don't provide them, then we'll let the evidence speak for itself. The photos, the testimonials, the medical impossibilities surrounding your husband's recovery. It's all very compelling television. Victor's response would either save their family or destroy everything they'd built. Standing in that hotel green room, with reporters gathering in the ballroom beyond, and his pregnant wife holding his hand like an anchor in a storm, he realized that their love story had become something larger than themselves. It had become a test of whether the world was ready to believe in miracles, or whether some secrets were too dangerous to survive the light. They wanted proof the babies were his, but getting that proof meant revealing the miracle that saved his legs and the secret that could destroy her family. The law firm's marble lobby echoed with clicking heels and whispered strategies, while outside, San Francisco's famous fog rolled in like an omen of the storm ahead. Victor sat beside Kiera in the conference room, watching their legal team spread documents across the mahogany table like battle plans. The paternity challenge is straightforward, their attorney, Michael Torres, explained. Morrison's faction is claiming medical impossibility based on your pre-marriage diagnosis. They want court-ordered DNA testing and complete medical disclosure. Can we refuse? Kiera asked, her hand resting protectively over her growing belly. Not without appearing guilty. The media coverage alone would destroy your reputation and tank the company's stock price. Torres adjusted his glasses, the gesture of a man delivering bad news he'd rather avoid. But agreeing to the tests opens another can of worms, which is medical scrutiny. If the DNA proves paternity, which we know it will, then medical experts will want to understand how Mr. Langston recovered full fertility from his condition. That leads to questions about treatment methods, recovery protocols, and my wife's involvement in that recovery, Victor finished. They've been married 8 months now, and the transformation in Victor's life was impossible to ignore. From wheelchair-bound and broken to walking, thriving, and expecting triplets, it was the kind of medical miracle that made doctors write research papers and reporters win Pulitzer Prizes. There's another issue, Torres continued. The fertility clinic records. Victor's blood ran cold. What fertility clinic records? Morrison's team has been thorough. They found no records of fertility treatments, artificial insemination, or any medical intervention that would explain the pregnancy. Which means, he paused, consulting his notes. Either this is a natural conception, medically unlikely given your condition, or there are treatment methods that aren't documented in traditional medical channels. Kiera shifted in her chair, and Victor caught the subtle warmth radiating from her skin, the healing energy that had become as familiar as breathing. Even now, stressed and exhausted, her body hummed with the power that had restored his spine and given them their impossible family. What do you recommend? Victor asked. Agree to the paternity testing. Control the narrative by being transparent about everything we can prove. But Torres hesitated. We need to prepare for questions we can't answer with conventional medicine. The medical examination took place at UCSF Medical Center under strict privacy protocols. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a renowned fertility specialist, conducted the test with the kind of clinical detachment that made Victor feel like a laboratory specimen. Mr. Langston, I need to ask about your recovery process, she said while drawing blood for the DNA analysis. Your medical history indicates complete spinal cord severance, which typically results in permanent loss of motor and sexual function. I was told the damage was permanent, yes, but obviously that prognosis was incorrect. Can you tell me about the treatments that facilitated your recovery? Victor exchanged glances with Kiera, who sat in the corner chair looking pale but determined. They'd rehearsed this conversation, but actually living it felt like walking through a minefield. Physical therapy mostly. My wife is a trained nurse. She helped with rehabilitation exercises. What kind of exercises? Standard protocols. Range of motion, electrical stimulation, massage therapy. Dr. Warren made notes, but her expression suggested she wasn't buying the simplified explanation. And the timeline? When did you first notice improvement? Another loaded question. Answer honestly, and they'd confirm the connection between his recovery and his marriage. Lie, and the medical records would contradict his story. Sensation began returning gradually after the wedding, he said carefully. Interesting. That coincides with your wife beginning her care protocols. Among other factors, yes. What lengths would you go to protect the people you love? Tell me about a time you had to fight for your family. In the lawyer's bathroom afterward, stress and desire collided as he pressed her against the door, both of them needing to feel alive and connected amidst the legal warfare. Her healing hands worked their magic even in those stolen moments, energy flowing between them like an electric current that recharged his determination to protect their family. Whatever happens, she whispered against his mouth, we face it together. Together, he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like desperation and hope. The results came back 3 days later, confirming what they already knew. Victor was definitely the father of all 3 babies. But Dr. Warren's accompanying report raised more questions than it answered. The DNA results are conclusive, she told them during the follow-up appointment. However, your hormone levels are unusual, Mrs. Langston. Unusual how? Elevated in ways that suggest genetic factors I haven't seen before. There are markers that typically correlate with enhanced healing abilities, accelerated cellular repair, even energy transfer capabilities. The room went deadly quiet. Victor felt Kiera tense beside him, her hand finding his automatically as Dr. Warren continued. I've seen similar patterns in a few other cases. Women from specific family lines who seem to possess extraordinary healing gifts. It's not recognized by mainstream medicine, but the genetic markers are consistent enough to suggest hereditary traits. What are you saying? Victor asked, though he already knew the answer. I'm saying your recovery might not be as medically impossible as originally thought. If your wife possesses certain genetic healing abilities, neurological restoration through energy transfer is theoretically possible. The cat was out of the bag. A respected medical professional had just confirmed, in writing, that Kiera might possess the exact abilities that Rebecca Chun and Morrison's faction had been speculating about. This information is protected by doctor-patient confidentiality, Torres said quickly. Of course, but if subpoenaed in a legal proceeding, Dr. Warren shrugged. I would be obligated to testify about my findings. They left the medical center knowing their secret was hanging by a thread. The DNA tests had vindicated them legally, but the medical examination had provided ammunition for anyone who wanted to prove that Kiera's healing abilities were real. Driving home through San Francisco traffic, Victor's phone rang with updates from his legal team. Morrison's faction was already requesting copies of the medical reports, claiming shareholder rights to information that might affect the CEO's fitness to lead. We can fight the subpoena, Torres said over the car's speaker system. Doctor-patient privilege should protect the detailed findings. Should? Kiera asked. Corporate law creates gray areas. If the board can argue that your medical condition affects the company's stability, they might have grounds to access the records. Victor pulled into their building's underground garage, where security guards kept the paparazzi at bay. But even in the relative privacy of their own parking space, they felt exposed, like every conversation was being recorded, every movement analyzed for clues about the mysterious healing that had changed their lives. There's something else, Torres continued. Morrison has scheduled a press conference for tomorrow morning. He's planning to present evidence about your recovery and demand full medical disclosure in the interest of shareholder transparency. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than usual. Victor watched the floor numbers climb, each digit bringing them closer to a confrontation that could destroy everything they'd built together. "What do we do?" Kiera asked as they entered their home. "We tell the truth," Victor said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Not to Morrison, not to the media, but to each other. We decide what our family is worth, and we fight for it." That night, they sat on their terrace overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, her hand in his, as they felt the triplets moving inside her growing belly. The city sparkled below them, but for the first time since they'd met, the beauty felt fragile, like something that could be taken away by the wrong word, the wrong revelation, the wrong choice. The medical examination confirmed what they already knew. The babies were definitely his. But the doctor's next words froze their blood. "Mrs. Langston, there's something unusual about your hormone levels that we need to discuss immediately." The trap was closing around them. Tomorrow, Morrison would present his evidence to the media and the board. The medical community would start asking questions about healing abilities that science couldn't explain. And somewhere in the growing storm of publicity and speculation, 3 unborn children were already becoming pawns in a game much larger than their parents' love story. But tonight, in the sanctuary of their penthouse terrace, Victor and Kiera held each other close and whispered promises about the future they were determined to protect, no matter what it cost them to keep it. The medical tests revealed more than paternity. They exposed a genetic gift that ran in her bloodline and changed everything the doctors thought they knew about impossible recoveries. Dr. Sarah Chan stared at Kiera's blood work results like she was seeing ghosts. The research facility buzzed with excitement as scientists examined her samples, each test result rewriting medical textbooks about cellular regeneration and neural recovery. "Mrs. Langston, your hormone levels show something we've never documented before," the doctor said, her voice thick with wonder. "There are proteins in your bloodstream that seem to accelerate healing at the cellular level. It's extraordinary." Victor sat beside Kiera's hospital bed, holding her hand while their world shifted again. The DNA tests had confirmed what they already knew. The triplets were definitely his. But the medical examination had revealed something far more dangerous. Scientific proof of abilities that weren't supposed to exist. "What exactly are you saying?" Victor asked carefully. "I'm saying your wife possesses genetic markers linked to accelerated healing. The same markers that could explain your miraculous recovery." Dr. Chen leaned forward, excitement glowing in her eyes. "This could revolutionize medicine as we know it." Kiera felt trapped between hospital sheets and scientific curiosity. "What happens now? We'd like to study you further. Document your abilities." The pharmaceutical applications alone could save millions of lives. But salvation for millions meant exposure for her family, the end of the quiet life she'd dreamed of with Victor and their children. She thought of her grandmother's warnings about keeping the gift hidden, about what happened when the world discovered what you could do. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course. But Mrs. Langston, this discovery could change everything." That evening, back in their penthouse sanctuary, Kiera sat in the nursery they'd been preparing. 3 cribs positioned like points of a triangle, each representing a future she was determined to protect. Her hands rested on her growing belly, where 3 tiny miracles grew stronger each day. Victor found her there, still wearing the hospital bracelet from her examination. "What are you thinking?" "That I want our children to have choices I never had. To use their gifts, if they inherit them, without hiding who they are." He knelt beside her chair, his recovered legs allowing him intimacy that had been impossible months before. "Then we make that choice together. The pharmaceutical companies have already called. 5 offers today, each one bigger than the last. $50 million for exclusive rights to study my abilities." "And what did you tell them?" "That some things aren't for sale." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "But Victor, what if we're being selfish? What if my gift could cure spinal injuries like yours? Could help people walk again, heal cancer, fix things that medicine can't touch?" That night, overwhelmed by the day's revelations and the weight of impossible choices, they made love with desperate intensity. Her hands glowing faintly with healing energy, his body responding with superhuman sensitivity, both of them crying with relief and passion. "Whatever we decide," he whispered against her neck afterward, "we decide together. No more secrets, no more hiding." But even as they held each other in the darkness, both knew their decision would affect more than just their family. Outside their penthouse windows, the city sparkled with the dreams of millions who might benefit from her gift, or be destroyed by the chaos that would follow its revelation. If you had a gift that could help people but put your family at risk, would you use it? Share your thoughts below. The morning brought news that would force their hand faster than they planned. The investigative reporter had connected the dots between Kiera's family history and Victor's recovery. The story would break in 48 hours, with or without their cooperation. "We have two choices," Victor said, pacing their living room like a caged tiger. "We run, disappear somewhere they can't find us, or we control the narrative ourselves." Kiera watched him move with fluid grace, remembering when those steps had been impossible. What kind of life would our children have if we're always running? What kind of life will they have if the world sees them as medical experiments? The pharmaceutical company's offer was staggering, $50 million for exclusive rights to study her abilities. But accepting meant leaving behind everything they'd built, and refusing might mean spending their lives in hiding from people who saw dollar signs where she saw sacred gifts passed down through generations. As they weighed impossible choices, Kiera felt the babies move inside her. 3 little lives that would inherit not just wealth and privilege, but abilities that could make them targets or saviors. The decision they made in the next 24 hours would determine whether their children grew up free or forever looking over their shoulders. $50 million to save the world, or lose her family forever. Some choices are too big for one person to make alone. The nursery took shape in their penthouse sanctuary despite the chaos swirling around them. 3 cribs positioned like points of a triangle, each representing a future they were determined to protect. Kiera stood in the doorway at 7 months pregnant, her body heavy with the weight of 3 miracles and the burden of an impossible decision. "The foundation papers are ready," Victor said, joining her in the soft yellow glow of the baby room. "We can establish it today, if you're sure." She turned to face him, this man who'd walked back into her life one step at a time, who'd grown from a cold business arrangement into the father of her children and the keeper of her heart. "The Langston Foundation for Healing Research." It sounds so official. It means we control how your gift gets studied. We set the rules, choose the researchers, decide what gets published. His hands came to rest on her swollen belly, where their triplets were practicing gymnastics. "Most importantly, we protect our family while helping others." The decision had come after sleepless nights weighing pharmaceutical offers against their children's futures. Instead of selling her abilities to the highest bidder, they'd chosen a third path, establishing their own research foundation to study healing genetics while maintaining privacy and ethical standards. "Dr. Martinez called again," Kiera said. 3 more hospitals want to partner with us. Word is spreading through the medical community. Let's spread, as long as we're in control." Heavy with pregnancy, but still glowing with the power that had saved his legs and would soon bring their children into the world, she let him massage her aching back while they discussed logistics. The foundation would be headquartered in a research facility outside the city, staffed with hand-picked scientists who understood that some discoveries required careful handling. "My grandmother would be proud," Kiera murmured as his strong hands worked tension from her shoulders. 3 generations of healing, finally stepping into the light. She'd be proud of you for finding a way to help people without sacrificing your family. The phone rang, Patricia calling with updates on media requests and corporate responses to their foundation announcement. Stock prices had jumped when Victor revealed he was funding cutting-edge medical research. Competitors who tried to exploit his paralysis were now scrambling to understand how he'd not only recovered, but positioned himself at the forefront of revolutionary science. "The charity gala is next week," Patricia reported. 500 guests confirmed. The mayor, 3 senators, and half of Silicon Valley's elite. This will be your formal introduction as philanthropists rather than just another tech couple. What's more important, Money that could help millions, or protecting the family that matters most to you? Tell me your choice. That evening, as Kiera soaked in their oversized bathtub while Victor worked on foundation documents, she felt a familiar flutter of movement inside her belly. Three distinct personalities were already emerging, one active at night, one calm during the day, one who seemed to respond to music with tiny kicks. "Do you think they'll have the gift?" she asked when he joined her in the bathroom. "Does it matter? We'll love them regardless. But if they do, they'll never have normal lives. There will always be people who want to study them, use them, turn them into something they're not." Victor knelt beside the tub, his fingers trailing through the warm water to find hers. "Then we teach them to be strong, to set boundaries, to choose when and how they use their gifts. Like I'm learning to do, like you're teaching me to do." Labor started during the charity gala, 3 weeks early, in front of 500 of Silicon Valley's most powerful people. Kiera's water broke as she was giving a speech about the foundation's mission. Her words about healing and hope interrupted by contractions that sent her gripping Victor's arm. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor announced to the stunned crowd, "it appears our children have decided tonight is the perfect time to make their entrance into the world." The race to the hospital became the most public birth in tech industry history, with news crews following their convoy through San Francisco streets, while Kiera breathed through contractions in the back seat of their limo. "This isn't how I planned it," she gasped between pains. "Nothing about us has gone according to plan," Victor replied, holding her hand as another contraction peaked. "Why should the babies be different?" By the time they reached the hospital, the media circus was in full swing. Reporters crowded the entrance while security guards formed a barrier, everyone wanting to capture the moment when a mysterious healing woman brought the tech mogul's miracle children into the world. In the delivery room, surrounded by doctors who'd studied her blood work and nurses who whispered about her abilities, Kiera felt exposed but determined. These children had been created from love, not contracts. They were coming into a world that would always be complicated, but they'd never doubt they were wanted. "Here comes baby number 1, Dr. Chen announced. The first cry filled the room like a benediction, followed quickly by 2 more as their triplets made their dramatic entrance into a world that was already watching, already judging, already planning their futures before they'd drawn their first breaths. As Victor held all 3 babies while Kiera recovered, he made an announcement that shocked everyone. They were establishing a foundation to research healing abilities like hers, but with one condition that would change medical ethics forever. No child with healing genetics could be studied without their informed consent as adults. Their love story had become a movement, proving that sometimes the greatest healings happen when 2 people choose each other every single day. She delivered 3 miracles in front of the world's cameras, and proved that some stories are too beautiful for anyone to doubt. The hospital delivery room glowed with more than medical lights. Camera crews respectfully documenting the moment 3 tiny Langstons entered the world to thunderous applause from the hallway. Nurses whispered prayers between contractions, while doctors marveled at the woman whose blood had rewritten their understanding of human potential. "Push, Kiera," Dr. Chan encouraged. Baby number 1 is almost here. Even in labor, she was magnificent, powerful, determined, bringing life into the world with the same strength she'd used to heal Victor, while he held her hand and fell deeper in love with every push. Sweat beaded her forehead, but her healing energy seemed to glow brighter as each contraction brought their children closer to birth. The first baby arrived at 11:47 p.m., a perfect daughter with her mother's dark eyes and her father's determined chin. Before the cord was even cut, tiny fingers wrapped around Kiera's thumb with surprising strength. "Victoria Rose," Kiera whispered, naming their daughter after the man who'd given her courage to step into the light. Baby number 2 followed 7 minutes later, a son who entered the world quietly, studying everything with wise eyes that seemed to take in far more than any newborn should. "Alexander James," Victor announced, his voice thick with emotion. The third arrival took longer, as if this child was reluctant to leave the warm safety of the womb. When baby number 3 finally made an appearance at 12:15 a.m., The delivery room erupted in laughter. Their youngest son came into the world with his tiny fist raised like he was ready to fight anyone who questioned his right to be there. "Samuel Victor," Kiera said through tears of joy and exhaustion. "Our little warrior." Dr. Chun performed the standard tests with hands that trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the honor of delivering children who might carry abilities that could change medicine forever. Each baby was perfect, healthy, with no signs of the genetic markers that made their mother so unique. "Will they have the gift?" Victor asked quietly as nurses cleaned and weighed their children. "Too early to tell," the doctor replied. "The abilities usually manifest later, if at all." But as Kiera held Victoria against her chest, she felt something. A warmth, a connection that went beyond normal mother-child bonding. When Alexander was placed in her arms, the sensation grew stronger. And when little Samuel joined his siblings, the healing energy in the room seemed to triple. The babies weren't just inheriting their parents' DNA, they were amplifying it. Outside in the hallway, reporters waited with respectful distance, while family members and friends celebrated the arrival of 3 children who'd already captured the world's attention. The live stream of their birth, approved by Victor and Kiera to control the narrative, had been viewed by millions around the globe. The Langston Triplets, news anchors announced to international audiences, born to parents whose love story has captivated everyone following their journey from arranged marriage to miracle family. What moment in your life felt like the whole world was watching? Share that experience in the comments. Back in the delivery room, as Victor held all 3 babies while Kiera recovered from the intense labor, something shifted in the atmosphere. The healing energy that had always emanated from her hands now seemed to flow between all 5 family members, creating a connection that transcended normal genetics. "They're special," Dr. Chin observed, watching the babies settle immediately when placed skin to skin with their parents. Not just because of who their parents are, but because of what they might become. "They're going to change everything," Kiera whispered, exhaustion and joy warring in her voice. "The foundation, the research, the way people think about healing and genetics." Victor looked down at his children, 3 perfect miracles who'd arrived exactly when the world was ready to accept that some things couldn't be explained by traditional science. Then we make sure they have the choice to change it on their own terms. As dawn broke over San Francisco, painting the hospital windows with gold and pink light, the Langston family faced their first morning together as a complete unit. The babies slept peacefully in the portable cribs, unaware that their birth had made headlines from Silicon Valley to Savannah. Patricia arrived with updates on media coverage, foundation donations that had poured in overnight, and requests for interviews from medical journals worldwide. The birth had transformed Victor and Kiera from scandal subjects into symbols of hope for millions who'd given up on miracles. The foundation received $12 million in donations since midnight, she reported quietly. Apparently, watching your children being born convinced a lot of people that some stories are worth believing in. But even as they celebrated their growing family and the world's acceptance of their love story, both parents knew their real work was just beginning. These children would grow up in the spotlight, their every milestone scrutinized for signs of inherited abilities. The challenge wouldn't be hiding their gifts, it would be helping them choose how to use them. As Victor made the announcement that shocked everyone, that the foundation would establish ethical guidelines protecting children with healing genetics from exploitation, little Victoria opened her eyes and seemed to look directly at him. For just a moment, her infant gaze held intelligence far beyond her hours of life. Their love story had become a legacy, proving that sometimes the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life. It recognizes the strength that's been there all along. They turned their love story into a movement, proving that the greatest healings happen when 2 people choose each other every single day. The foundation's headquarters rose from Silicon Valley soil like hope made manifest, its healing gardens visible from their penthouse home where 3 6-month-old babies gurgled in satisfaction. Victor stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching construction crews put finishing touches on the building that would house the most advanced healing research in the world. The ethics board approved our protocols, Kiera announced, emerging from the nursery with Victoria balanced on her hip. The baby reached for her father with grabbing hands, already showing signs of the strength that ran in both their bloodlines. No exploitation, no force testing, no treating children like lab rats, Victor summarized, taking his daughter and watching her tiny fingers grip his shirt with surprising force. Exactly. Any child who shows healing abilities gets protection, education, and choice. Always choice. The Langston Foundation for Healing Ethics had grown beyond their wildest expectations in the 6 months since the triplets' birth. Donations poured in from around the world. Medical schools partnered with their research programs, and families with unusual abilities finally had somewhere to turn for support instead of hiding. Alexander and Samuel were napping in their swings, both boys showing early signs of their mother's gift. Alexander's touch seemed to soothe his fussing siblings, while Samuel's presence made plants grow faster in their nursery garden. Victoria showed no healing abilities yet, but her intelligence was remarkable, following conversations with eyes that seemed to understand far more than any 6-month-old should. Dr. Martinez called, Victor said, gently bouncing Victoria as she played with his tie. The first Healing Genetics Conference is fully booked. Scientists from 30 countries want to attend. In our keynote speech, Ethical Evolution: How Science and Family Can Coexist. He smiled as Victoria managed to unknot his expensive silk tie completely. Think we're ready to tell the world how this really works. 6 months postpartum, Kiera had rediscovered her body and their relationship with new depth. The woman who'd once signed a contract to save her family's clinic now stood at the center of a medical revolution, but she'd never lost sight of what mattered most. The man who'd learned to walk again, and the children they'd created from love instead of obligation. That evening, after the babies were settled in their cribs, she found Victor in their bedroom reviewing foundation reports. The penthouse had been transformed from a cold showplace into a warm family home, with toys scattered across marble floors and finger paintings decorating refrigerator doors. Remember when this place felt like a museum? She asked, settling beside him on their bed. Before you brought it to life. Before you brought me back to life. She traced the scar along his spine, faded now, but still visible reminder of the accident that had brought them together. Her healing touch had evolved over the months, becoming more precise, more controlled. She could pinpoint exactly what needed repair and fix it with surgical precision. The children are going to be so much stronger than I ever was, she mused. Alexander's empathic healing, Samuel's growth acceleration, Victoria's analytical abilities. They're not just inheriting the gift, they're improving on it. Then we teach them responsibility, boundaries, how to use their abilities to help without losing themselves. They made love with the passion of partners who'd chosen each other again and again, through contracts and complications, through public scrutiny and private fears. Her healing hands worked their magic while his grateful touches mapped the changes motherhood had brought, both of them stronger and more connected than ever. How has becoming a parent changed your relationship for the better? Share your growth story below. Later, as they watched their children sleep through the baby monitor, Kiera felt the familiar warmth building in her palms. But this time, it wasn't healing energy. Something new was stirring, a different kind of power that felt like anticipation wrapped in possibility. Victor, she said quietly, I need to tell you something. He looked up from the foundation reports, immediately alert. What is it? I'm pregnant again. The words hung in the air between them like music, like promises, like the completion of a symphony they'd been composing since that first contract signing in a Savannah law office. His eyes went wide with shock, then joy, then something that looked like overwhelming gratitude. How long have you known? A week. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. He set aside his papers and pulled her close, his hands coming to rest on her still flat stomach where new life was beginning. Number 4. Created from choice, not chance. From love, not contracts. This pregnancy felt different from the triplets, calmer, more intentional. The foundation was established, their family was secure, and their love had been tested by every challenge the world could throw at them. This child would be born into stability instead of scandal, into a world that had already accepted that miracles could wear business suits and healing hands could build empires. The timing is perfect, Victor mused. The foundation will be fully operational by the time the baby arrives. Our protocols will be tested and proven. This child will grow up in a world where abilities like yours are respected, not feared. On their first wedding anniversary, as they watched their triplets sleep peacefully in cribs that had once seemed like dreams, Kiera felt a familiar tingling in her palms. But this time, it wasn't healing energy. Something new was stirring, and it would complete their family in ways they never imagined. Their love story had become a legacy, proving that some arrangements become the most beautiful accidents of fate. 1 year later, the woman who married for duty carried new life created from pure love, proof that the best stories write themselves when you stop trying to control the ending. The rooftop garden of their Napa Valley estate bloomed with healing herbs from her grandmother's collection, while their triplets toddled between the rows like guardian angels of growth. At 18 months old, Victoria could identify every plant by touch. Alexander could make wilted flowers bloom with his bare hands, and Samuel's laughter made the whole garden shimmer with health. Kiera stood among the lavender and rosemary, her hands resting on the growing curve of her belly where baby number 4 thrived strong and healthy. The morning sun painted everything gold, and she never felt more complete. Not because her life was perfect, but because every imperfect moment had led to this. The documentary crew wants to film here next week. Victor called from the garden gate, their youngest son perched on his shoulders like a tiny king surveying his kingdom. Samuel giggled and tugged his father's hair, his touch making Victor's scalp tingle with residual healing energy. "Let them come," Kiera replied, watching Victoria carefully water seedlings with the concentration of a master gardener. "The world should see how normal we really are." Normal. It was a word that had taken on new meaning over the past year. Normal now meant family dinners where Alexander healed his siblings' scraped knees while Victoria analyzed the molecular structure of vegetables. Normal meant foundation board meetings where the world's leading scientists discussed ethics protocols while Samuel napped in his portable crib. Normal meant loving a man who walked on legs she'd healed, raising children whose gifts would change medicine forever, and carrying a new life that represented pure choice instead of desperate necessity. The Langston Foundation had revolutionized how the medical community approached healing genetics. Their research facility in Silicon Valley employed hundreds of scientists working under strict ethical guidelines that protected children with abilities while advancing human understanding of cellular regeneration. Dr. Chin published the results of her latest tests. Victor continued, settling Samuel in his play area before joining Kiera among the herbs. "Your healing abilities have evolved again since the pregnancy. You're not just repairing damage anymore, you're optimizing healthy tissue." "Evolution," she mused, feeling the baby kick as if responding to their conversation. "This little one is going to be different from the triplets. I can feel it." "Different how?" Instead of answering with words, she took his hand and placed it on her belly where their 4th child grew. His eyes widened as warmth flowed between them. Not just her healing energy, but something new, something that felt like pure creation instead of repair. "She's not just inheriting the gift," Kiera whispered. "She's transforming it into something we've never seen before." They learned the baby was a girl 3 weeks ago, and both had immediately known her name, Grace. Not just because of the elegance the name suggested, but because Grace was what had brought them together. The grace to see past contracts to connection, past arrangement to authentic love, past healing to wholeness. That afternoon, while the triplets napped and the California sun turned their garden into a living cathedral, Victor and Kiera made love with the reverence of partners who traveled from strangers to soulmates. He worshipped her pregnant body with touches that spoke of gratitude deeper than words, while her healing hands traced the strong lines of his spine, the spine she'd rebuilt the backbone of their entire love story. "This one wasn't part of any contract," she whispered afterward, both of them breathless and glowing in the afternoon light streaming through their bedroom windows. "This one is pure choice," he agreed, kissing her deeply and tasting joy and possibility on her lips. The anniversary party that evening brought together everyone who'd been part of their journey, from Patricia, who'd watched their fake marriage become real love, to Dr. Chun, who documented miracles that changed textbooks. The triplets charmed guests by demonstrating abilities that no longer seemed impossible, just beautifully different. "A toast," Victor announced to the gathering crowd, raising his glass while keeping his other arm around Kiera's shoulders. "To arranged marriages that become chosen families. To healing hands that fix more than bodies. To love stories that prove miracles happen when you least expect them. To second chances," Kiera added, her hand protective over her growing belly. "And fourth babies who remind us that the best gifts come when you're finally ready to receive them." As applause filled their garden, little Victoria toddled over and placed her small hand on her mother's stomach. For just a moment, her 18-month-old eyes held wisdom beyond her years. "Baby Grace is special, Mama," she said in the clear voice that never failed to surprise adults who expected toddler babble. "How do you know her name, sweetheart?" Kiera asked. "She told me. She says she's going to help fix the whole world." What would you say to someone who thinks love can't grow from unexpected beginnings? Tell me about a relationship that surprised you with its strength. Later that night, after guests had gone home and children had been tucked into beds, Victor and Kiera stood in their garden under stars that had witnessed their entire transformation from contract to commitment. The healing herbs released their fragrance into the night air, while Grace moved gently in her mother's womb, as if dancing to music only she could hear. "5 years ago, I thought love was a luxury I couldn't afford," Kiera said softly. "5 years ago, I thought I was broken beyond repair," Victor replied. "Now look at us. Now look at us." They had built an empire not of silicon and circuits, but of healing and hope. Their foundation protected children with gifts, their research advanced human understanding of genetics, and their family proved that love could bloom in the most unlikely soil. As Grace kicked against her mother's ribs, both parents smiled. This child would grow up in a world that celebrated differences instead of hiding them, where abilities were gifts to be nurtured rather than secrets to be buried. She would choose how to use her gifts, when to reveal them, and what legacy to build with them. If this story of healing, love, and second chances touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible true-to-life tales. Comment below, what miracle would you create if you had Kiera's gift? And remember, sometimes the most beautiful love stories start as business deals and end as legacies. Thanks for joining Victor and Kiera's journey from arrangement to adoration. Their story had come full circle, from desperate contracts to deliberate choices, from hidden gifts to public purpose, from broken hearts to healing hands that had mended more than bodies. They had healed each other's souls and created a legacy that would outlast any corporation or contract. Love, it turned out, was the most powerful healing force of all.